The day Naima saw her sister wearing her wedding ring, everything inside her broke. That ring was special, a promise, a future, a dream. Her fiancé had given it to her with love, and she wore it every day like a treasure. But now, there it was, shining on her sister's finger like it had always belonged there. Naima stood frozen, her heart pounding, waiting for someone to explain. But instead of guilt, her sister smiled, proud and shameless. When Naima asked what was going on, her whole family turned against her. They called her jealous, dramatic, even crazy. No one believed her. No one stood by her. Hurt and betrayed, she packed her things and walked away. She had no money, no place to go, and no one to trust. For months, she lived in silence, taking small jobs just to survive. Then one day, something unbelievable happened. A billionaire collapsed outside the small cafe where she worked. While others panicked, Naima ran to help. She saved his life. Later, he came back. Not just to thank her, but to offer her a job. Slowly, they became close. She didn't just earn his trust, she earned his heart. He gave her a new life, a new name, and a love she never expected. 1 year later, an invitation came, her sister's wedding anniversary. Naima smiled. She showed up in a Rolls-Royce, hand in hand with her billionaire husband. When she walked in, the whole room froze. No one said a word, but everyone remembered. Naima couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her own sister, Amina, stood in front of her, proudly wearing the wedding ring that Naima's fiancé had given her. That ring was supposed to be a symbol of love, trust, and a future they had planned together. For a moment, Naima thought maybe it was a mistake, maybe it was just a similar ring. But when she asked about it, her sister didn't deny it. Instead, she smirked and said, "He chose me." Naima's heart dropped. She turned to her parents, expecting them to be shocked, to take her side. But they didn't. Her mother told her to calm down. Her father said she was overreacting. Her brother rolled his eyes. And then came the words that cut deeper than the betrayal itself, "You're just jealous." Naima stood there, shaking, as the people she had loved her whole life looked at her like she was the problem. Her voice cracked as she tried to defend herself, but no one listened. Her sister played the victim perfectly, acting sweet and innocent while Naima was left looking angry and bitter. The man she once loved stood beside her sister, silent and cold. Naima realized in that moment that she was alone. Not just heartbroken, but completely alone. Her family didn't care that she had been betrayed. They didn't want the truth. They wanted peace, even if it meant crushing her in the process. That night, Naima packed a small bag and walked out of the house she once called home. Her mother didn't stop her. Her father didn't ask where she was going. No one begged her to stay. The silence was loud, painful, and final. With tears in her eyes, she left the village with no money, no plan, and no one. The world felt big and cruel, and Naima felt small. She slept on buses, looked for any work she could find, and kept her head down. She didn't speak much, her voice felt lost after everything she'd been through. People around her didn't know her story, and she didn't tell them. She carried her pain quietly, like a secret in her chest. But deep inside, a fire still burned. Naima knew she had to survive. Not for them, but for herself. She worked long hours in tiny cafes, cleaned apartments, did whatever it took to eat and have a place to sleep. She learned to live without love, without comfort, and without anyone saying, "I believe you." Every day she woke up, even when it hurt. Every night, she reminded herself, one day, they will see. And one day, everything changed, but not because of revenge, or anger. It changed because Naima didn't give up. She kept moving forward, even when no one believed in her. Even when her own family had turned their backs and called her jealous, she refused to become the person they painted her as. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She just kept walking, straight toward the life they never thought she'd have. Naima left the village in the middle of the night, wearing the same clothes she had cried in all day. Her heart felt heavy, her eyes swollen from tears, and her hands shaking as she walked past the quiet houses, past the memories, past the people who once called her family. She didn't say goodbye. What was the point? No one had stood up for her. No one had believed her. They all called her jealous, like she was the one who had done something wrong. She had lost her fiancé, her sister had stolen her ring, and her family had thrown her heart away like it didn't matter. So she left. No plan. No money. No home. Just pain. Just silence. Naima took a bus to the city, using the little coins she had in her pocket. She didn't know where she was going. She didn't care. She just needed to be far away. Her phone was off. She didn't want to hear anyone's voice. She didn't want fake apologies or more lies. She wanted to disappear. And she did. She vanished like a ghost, into a world where no one knew her name. In the city, she wandered the streets with tired feet and an empty stomach. She searched for shelter, slept on benches, and stayed quiet. She barely spoke a word. The pain had stolen her voice. The betrayal had stolen her trust. But Naima refused to break. She found small jobs, cleaning shops, washing dishes, carrying boxes. Anything. She worked from morning to night, saving every little coin. She ate simple food, shared rooms with strangers, and kept to herself. She didn't tell anyone her story. She didn't cry in front of anyone. Every time she looked in the mirror, she whispered, "You are still here." Her eyes had lost their shine, but not their strength. Some days were harder than others. Some days, she wanted to give up, to go back and ask her family why. But she stopped herself. They didn't deserve her pain anymore. They didn't deserve her strength. She knew she had to keep going, even when her legs felt weak, even when the world felt cold. Slowly, piece by piece, Naima started building herself again. Not the girl who needed others to love her. Not the girl who cried for a man. But a woman who could stand on her own, even when everything was taken from her. Her voice didn't come back all at once. But one day, she found herself humming while working. Then singing softly while sweeping the floor. Then laughing quietly with a kind customer. And that was the beginning. The beginning of her return, not to her old life, but to her true self. The one no one could steal or silence. She had vanished from the village. But she wasn't lost. She was becoming. And one day, the same world that turned its back on her would have no choice but to look at her again, and see the woman they never thought she could be. Naima was working a long, tiring shift at a small cafe tucked between noisy streets and busy shops. It wasn't much, but it helped her survive. She cleaned tables, served coffee, and smiled politely, even when her heart still felt heavy. Life hadn't been easy, but she had learned to live quietly, without expecting much. That afternoon, the sun was hot, and the city buzzed like always. She was wiping the front window when she noticed a man across the street. He was dressed in a sharp suit, but something was wrong. He looked dizzy. He stumbled forward, holding his chest. Then, right in front of the cafe, he collapsed. People around screamed. Some pulled out their phones. No one moved to help him. But Naima didn't think twice. She dropped her cloth and ran outside. His face was pale, and his breathing was weak. "Sir, can you hear me?" she asked, kneeling beside him. There was no answer. Her hands shook, but she remembered the first aid training she'd once taken during her cleaning job. She checked his pulse, tilted his head, and made sure he was breathing. She called for an ambulance and stayed by his side, holding his hand and whispering, "You'll be okay, just hold on." When the ambulance came, they rushed him to the hospital. Naima stayed behind, heart pounding, hoping he'd survive. She didn't know who he was. She didn't care. She just couldn't watch someone die without trying. A few days later, something strange happened. A black car stopped outside the cafe. A man in a suit stepped out and asked for her by name. Her first thought was that something bad had happened. But instead, he smiled and handed her a note. It was from the man she had saved. He wasn't just any man, he was one of the richest billionaires in the country. He owned companies, buildings, even the cafe she worked in. In the note, he thanked her for saving his life. He said that when he collapsed, everything went dark, but he remembered her voice. Her calmness. Her courage. He wanted to meet her. The next day, Naima was invited to visit him at the hospital. She walked in nervously, unsure of what to say. But he smiled as soon as he saw her. "You saved my life," he said softly. "Now let me change yours." Naima was speechless. No one had ever said those words to her before. He offered her a better job, not as a cleaner, but as his personal assistant. It came with a home, a salary she couldn't even dream of, and a new beginning. At first, she didn't know if she could trust it. After everything she had been through, it felt unreal. But something inside her said yes. This was not luck. This was the reward for not giving up. Naima had once vanished with nothing, no voice, no home, no love. But now, because of one brave moment, her life was about to change forever. And it all started with a man who fell, and a woman who chose to rise. Naima couldn't believe how fast her life was changing. Just weeks ago, she had been cleaning floors and serving coffee in silence. Now, she was walking through shiny glass offices, wearing clothes she had only seen on others, working directly beside the man whose life she had saved. His name was Zion. Powerful, quiet, kind. At first, she didn't know what to say to him. She felt nervous, out of place. But Zion never treated her like she was less. He listened when she spoke. He asked about her ideas. He saw something in her that no one else had ever seen, not even her own family. He gave her the job of personal assistant, but it felt like more than that. He took time to teach her, guide her, and slowly she began to believe in herself again. He praised her for her hard work, trusted her with big decisions, and always made sure she was okay. The people in the office were surprised. They couldn't understand why their billionaire boss was always kind to the quiet girl with the sad eyes. But Naima didn't care what they thought. She was finally building a life of her own, with dignity and strength. Over time, something unexpected happened. The connection between Naima and Zion grew deeper. They started talking not just about work, but about life. They shared stories, laughed over small things, and found comfort in each other's silence. Naima had been so used to being invisible, but with him, she felt seen. Truly seen. Zion, too, had his own pain, his own scars. And in Naima, he found peace, something he hadn't felt in years. One evening, after a long day at work, Zion invited her to dinner. Not as her boss, but as her friend. That night, he looked at her differently, not with pity, not with kindness, but with admiration. "Naima," he said gently, "you didn't just save my life. You reminded me how to live." She blushed, unsure what to say. But in her heart, she knew things were changing. Weeks passed, and their bond only grew stronger. Then, one morning, in a quiet garden filled with flowers and sunshine, Zion turned to her and said, "I want you beside me, not just at work, but in life. Will you be my wife?" Naima gasped. Her heart raced. She couldn't speak at first. This couldn't be real. But it was. She nodded, eyes full of tears. "Yes," she whispered. Zion didn't just give her a job, he gave her his last name. He gave her love, respect, and a new family. The girl who had once walked away from her village with no voice, no home, no one, was now a woman standing beside a man who cherished her. People around them were shocked. How could a billionaire fall in love with a girl who had nothing? But Zion saw what they didn't: her heart, her strength, her soul. Naima had lost everything once. But this time, she had gained something far more powerful. Not just a husband. Not just a name. But a life full of love, the kind no money could ever buy. One morning, while Naima was sitting by the window of her beautiful home, sipping tea and reading the news, something unexpected arrived: a white envelope with gold edges. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw the name on it. It was from her family. Her hands shook slightly as she opened it. Inside was an invitation to her sister Amina's wedding anniversary party. The same sister who had stolen her ring, her fiancé, and turned her whole family against her. The same sister who had smiled while Naima broke down. For a moment, she felt a familiar pain in her chest. The memories came rushing back: the betrayal, the insults, the night she walked away with nothing. She held the invitation and thought, why now? Was this some kind of joke? Or did they want to show her how happy they still were without her? But instead of anger, Naima felt something else: peace. She was no longer the broken girl they had called jealous. She was no longer crying, begging to be believed. She was now Naima Zion, wife of one of the most powerful men in the city. She had built a new life from nothing, filled with love, respect, and strength. So she smiled, folded the invitation neatly, and said softly, "Yes. I'll go." But not to prove anything, not to fight or argue. She wanted to show up with her head held high, to let them see the woman she had become. She didn't tell Zion at first. She just placed the invitation on the table. He glanced at it, read the names, and looked at her gently. "Do you want to go?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "I do." Zion smiled and said, "Then I'll be right beside you. No questions. No judgment. Just support, the kind she had never known before." The day of the party arrived. Naima wore a simple but elegant dress, with soft makeup and a calm expression. Zion, as always, looked sharp in his suit. But more than his wealth, it was his quiet strength beside her that made her feel powerful. They stepped into a black Rolls-Royce, and the ride was silent, peaceful. Naima looked out the window, remembering the girl who once walked away from this same family with tears in her eyes and shoes full of dust. Now, she was going back, but not as the same girl. When they arrived, heads turned. The car door opened, and Naima stepped out first, followed by Zion. Hand in hand, they walked into the hall. Conversation stopped. Glasses paused mid-air. Every face turned toward them. Her mother's eyes widened. Her father blinked in disbelief. Amina froze, her smile slowly disappearing. And the man who once left Naima for her sister. He looked like he had seen a ghost. Naima didn't say much. She didn't need to. Her presence said everything. Calm, confident, unbothered. She walked past the people who once crushed her, now standing taller than ever. No revenge, no anger, just grace. She smiled gently, held Zion's hand tighter, and whispered to herself, "I'm not back for them. I'm back for me." The sound of the car engine was soft, but heads outside the hall started turning. A black Rolls-Royce pulled up slowly, shining under the evening lights. The driver stepped out and opened the door gently. First, one elegant heel touched the ground. Then Naima stepped out, dressed in a flowing gown that moved like silk in the wind. Her face was calm, her eyes full of quiet strength. Then Zion stepped out beside her, tall, confident, and powerful, holding her hand like she was the most important person in the world. They didn't rush. They walked side by side, hand in hand, into the building like they belonged there. Because now, they did. As soon as they entered the room, everything stopped. Conversations fell silent. Music faded into the background. People turned to stare. The same room that once rejected her was now speechless at her presence. Her sister's smile faded. Her parents' eyes widened in shock. The man who had once left her for another woman stared in disbelief. Naima didn't flinch. She didn't need to say a word. Her grace, her strength, her peace, it said everything. She walked through the crowd with her head high, her hand resting gently in Zion's. There was no revenge in her heart, no need to prove anything. She had already won. Not by shouting, not by fighting, but by rising. Quietly. Powerfully. The girl they once broke had come back as a woman they could never touch again. And in that silent, frozen room, everyone knew, Naima had returned, not for applause, not for approval, but to show that even the deepest pain can become the most beautiful power.